Now, the next big thing for us to focus on, all right, we have our Compromise of 1820 in place, the Missouri Compromise. We have this idea of where slavery can and cannot expand to. We have this idea of needing to keep the balance between the slave states and free states, the number of states in our union, in order to keep an equal number of senators, right? To have an equitable, more egalitarian distribution of Congress and Senate seats. All right, we have all this, and it's fine for the most part. But we continue to expand further out west. We're led by that Manifest Destiny Angel, the picture from earlier in the year. And we end up getting in contact with our first major competitor for this land. Now, we kind of fought and made agreements with the British over territory. We invaded Canada. That didn't work out well for us. We had the White House burned down. That wasn't a good look. But we learned, all right, we're not messing with the British anymore. We'll work with them. Mexico, on the other hand, is in our way, and they're expanding, and they have all this cool land that we want to get our hands on. So we start trying to work out a deal with them. Now, it didn't end up working out. We basically said, hey, Mexico, we're going to give you a couple $1 million for Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, California, Nevada, Utah, and Colorado. Here's like $1 million for it. They said, no, there's a lot of land and resources in there. Why don't you have some of your people become Mexican citizens? And they could farm there, and we'll trade with each other, and everything's going to be great. Americans started moving into Mexico. They became citizens of Mexico. And they were making good money. They liked it until Mexico forced them to learn Spanish, become Catholics, and give up their slaves. And as we know, these are people from Texas. Even though it's 1840, Texas is still going to do what Texas does. Texas is just like Florida. Right? I'm surprised there's no Texas man memes, but I digress. All right? War with Mexico is imminent. And this shouldn't be a surprise to us because Mexico is in that money spot beneath the southern border of Missouri. Right? Mexico offers us a lot of territory below that compromise line, which means slavery could expand as we expanded to the west. So, Democrats under President Polk wanted war. The goal of which was to expand slavery. Now, we don't need to know a lot about this. All we really need to know is we beat Mexico. It was not much of a competition. It was a year and a half of war, really caused over a disagreement in territory. We believed that the natural border of Texas and Mexico was the Rio Grande. They believed it was the Nueces River, which is further north in Texas, if you can imagine the state map. So both of us had troops and land that we thought belonged to us, and both us and Mexico thought that we were invading each other simultaneously. Again, it's just a bad miscommunication, probably because the Texans refused to learn Spanish. They ended up going to war. We wrecked them, and a guy who was a Whig, the opposite party of the Democrats, a Whig general named Winfield Scott, signs the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Instead of acquiring all of Mexico like the Democrats wanted, we acquired Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, California, and Nevada. For $2 million. Which was the same deal we offered before all of this war started. Right? The Democrats were not happy about this because they did not get as much land as they wanted. The Whigs weren't happy about this because slavery was expanding and they weren't too crazy about the expansion of slavery. So America really doesn't get what they want to the full extent with which they wanted it. They did get some land. They did get some land for slavery to expand to south of that compromise line, but it led to some problems, specifically with California. Alright, so California is a big deal because Cali splits the Missouri Compromise line. And California has gold. So they want California to become a state ASAP. This leads to the Compromise of 1850, which we talked about Friday. Now, the Compromise of 1850 was a 5-part plan proposed by Henry Clay, denied by everybody else because they were sick of our boy Henry Bay. Stephen Douglas came along. Old Stevie D. No slave trade in D.C. Texas gives up land. Popular sovereignty in Utah and New Mexico. Cali is a free state. And a more harsh Fugitive Slave Act. So the Fugitive Slave Act, we didn't talk too much about this on Friday. Basically, there's always a Fugitive Slave Act. Remember, slaves, not people, they're property. So if slaves escape to the north, typically, hey, you're free, you made it to the north, enjoy yourself. With this much more harsh Fugitive Slave Act that Stephen Douglas dropped on us in 1850, if you were a northerner and you knew of slaves in your area and did not report them, you would be punished for not turning them in. Alright, this is the opposite of snitches get stitches. If you're not snitching, you're getting stitches, which is just not cool. But this ended up angering the North. Alright, this, more than anything else, leads to our key word. Sectional tension. Wow, that is terrible handwriting. More sectional tension. Right? Everything, all of this, is leading to the Civil War. Our key word, sectional tension. From the Compromise, which was supposed to stop the war from happening, which it did. The war does not happen in 1850. It happens in 1860. But this one piece of a compromise to hold off war ended up leading to more tension, ends up leading to more potential for violence moving forward. Alright, so popular sovereignty is a big idea that comes out of it. Popular sovereignty is where the people in the territory would vote on whether or not they wanted to be a slave or a free state, and then that Fugitive Slave Act led to the potential sectional tension here. Now, one thing that I did not talk about, and I'm sorry this is going to be out of order, alright, but there was this thing called the, I'm blanking on it now, the Wilmot Proviso. And we will go blue for that one. Before the war with Mexico, Now I'm going back in time. This is going to get confusing. This was a proposed bill that never ended up passing. It never became a law. This was just an idea. But there's this saying from Law and Order SVU. I know we have some SVU heads in here. Much, much, much better than Criminal Minds. There's this idea that you cannot unring a bell. So if I say something and the jury hears it, even though the attorney objects and the judge says, oh, removed, jury, ignore that last statement. You can't have someone like extract it from their brain. It's always going to be there. And really, there's that whole psychological thing where if you tell someone not to listen or not to do something, there's that whole operational defiance part of our brain that makes us want to listen even harder. So the Wilmot Proviso, even though it does not pass, ends up being a very big deal. A Northern Democrat named David Wilmot said all land from Mexico should be free land. Now this is a big deal because he is a Democrat. We've talked about this all year. The big bad Democrats, they were the slave owners. They were the rich guys who loved slavery. They made millions and millions of dollars off of it. And he is a Democrat talking about stopping slavery from expanding. This idea is a big deal because it shows that slavery is not a Democrat versus Whig idea. There were plenty of Whigs who owned slaves. The Republican Party doesn't exist as of the 1846, 48, 50 time period. Alright, so he is a Northerner talking about ending slavery, or at least stopping slavery from expanding, even though that land from Mexico would have been below the compromise line. What's this going to lead to, ladies and gentlemen? More sectional tension. The Northerners are trying to take our slaves away. The Northerners are trying to stop slavery from expanding. The Northerners are trying to control everything and end up removing slavery. All of these seeds are being planted, and it should not surprise us when it ends up blooming into this civil war. All right, here we go. More sectional tension just from the Mexican-American War.